Funny, isn't it? People will watch you struggle in silence and call it humility. They'll watch you fail and call it reality. They'll watch you doubt yourself and tell you they're just being honest. But the moment you start growing, the moment your confidence becomes visible, the moment your dreams begin turning into results, something changes. The same people who were comfortable with your excuses become uncomfortable with your progress. Not because you've hurt them, not because you've changed, because your growth becomes a mirror that reflects the risks they never took, the fears they never faced, and the potential they chose to ignore. And sometimes, the thing people fear most isn't your failure. It's the possibility that you might actually become everything you said you would. Most people think growth is inspiring. They believe that when someone improves their life, becomes stronger, more disciplined, more confident, everyone around them will celebrate. That's a beautiful story. It's also a dangerous illusion. The truth is, your growth has a strange effect on people. It forces them to look at themselves. As long as you stay where you are, nobody feels threatened. Nobody feels uncomfortable. You're familiar, predictable, safe. You fit inside the version of reality they've created in their minds. But the moment you begin changing, something shifts beneath the surface. When you start waking up earlier, working harder, thinking differently, taking responsibility for your life, people notice. Not because you're making noise, but because you're creating contrast. Your actions become evidence that change is possible. And that's where the discomfort begins. You see, many people spend years building explanations for why they can't move forward. They blame circumstances, bad luck, timing, other people, anything that helps them avoid facing the harder truth. Then someone standing right beside them starts growing under the same conditions. Suddenly, those excuses don't feel as strong as they used to. Your progress becomes a reminder of the goals they abandoned, the risks they were afraid to take, the promises they made to themselves and quietly forgot. And people don't always react well to reminders. That's why some individuals become colder when you're winning. That's why support sometimes turns into sarcasm. That's why encouragement can slowly transform into criticism disguised as concern. They don't necessarily hate you. They hate the feeling your growth creates inside them, because every step you take forward silently asks a question they don't want to answer. If it's possible for you, then what's stopping me? That question can be uncomfortable enough to make people pull away, doubt you, underestimate you, or hope you return to the version of yourself they understood. The version that made them feel secure. The version that didn't challenge anything. Growth doesn't expose your flaws first. It exposes theirs, not because you point them out. Not because you judge them, not because you say a single word. Your existence becomes proof that excuses can be defeated, habits can be changed, and limits can be broken. And for someone who has spent years convincing themselves otherwise, that proof can feel more threatening than any insult ever could. The strange part is that the more quietly you improve, the louder that proof becomes. People like the version of you they can predict, the version that asks for permission before making a move, the version that doubts every decision, the version that needs approval, reassurance, and validation before taking a single step forward. That version is comfortable for them because they understand it. They know how it reacts, how it thinks, and most importantly, how much influence they have over it. Control rarely looks like control. It doesn't always come with commands, threats, or obvious manipulation. Sometimes it arrives disguised as advice, sometimes it hides behind concern, sometimes it wears the mask of friendship, support, or even love. It slowly teaches you to stay small without ever saying the words directly. As long as you remain dependent on other people's opinions, they feel secure. As long as your confidence can be shaken by a few comments, they feel important. As long as your direction can be changed by their approval or disapproval, they feel powerful. Then something happens. You start growing. You stop asking everyone what they think before making decisions. You stop explaining every goal. You stop defending every dream. You become more certain, more focused, more independent. Not arrogant, not selfish, just stronger. And that's when some people begin feeling uncomfortable, because the version of you they once influenced is disappearing. The person who used to second-guess every move is now trusting their own judgment. The person who once needed permission is now creating their own path. The person who was easy to guide is becoming difficult to control. What frustrates them isn't your success itself, it's the loss of access, the loss of influence, the realization that their words no longer carry the same weight they once did. That's why growth often changes relationships in unexpected ways. The moment you become more confident, some people call you different. The moment you develop boundaries, some people call you difficult. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, some people accuse you of changing. They're right. You did change. You changed because growth demands it. The old version of you was built around fear, hesitation, and the need to be accepted. The new version is built around self-respect, clarity, and purpose. And when someone has become attached to the version they could influence, watching that version disappear can feel like losing control of a story they thought they were helping write. Because people rarely resist your success, they resist becoming irrelevant to the person they once believed they understood. Everyone loves a dream. A dream is harmless. A dream is entertaining. A dream gives people something positive to talk about without forcing them to believe it will ever happen. When you tell people about your ambitions, many of them smile. They nod their heads. They tell you to go for it. They tell you that you deserve success. They applaud the idea because ideas are comfortable. EDs don't change the balance. EDs don't challenge expectations. EDs don't threaten anyone's view of the world. A dream lives in the future, far away from reality, where nobody has to take it seriously. That's why support is often easiest to find at the beginning. People cheer for the vision because the vision hasn't become real yet. They admire the possibility because the possibility still feels distant. They enjoy hearing about your goals because goals are just words floating in the air. Then something strange happens. You stop talking and start doing. You become disciplined when nobody is watching. You keep showing up when motivation disappears. You sacrifice comfort, distractions, and excuses. Slowly, the dream begins taking shape. What was once an idea starts becoming evidence, and evidence changes everything. People can ignore a dream, they can't ignore results. The moment your progress becomes visible, the conversation changes. The same people who once encouraged you begin questioning your decisions. The same people who admired your ambition become uncomfortable with your commitment. The same voices that said you can do it suddenly start listing reasons why you might fail. Not because your dream changed, because reality arrived. A dream allows people to feel supportive without feeling challenged. Reality forces comparison. Reality creates contrast. Reality makes people look at their own lives. When your success exists only in your imagination, nobody feels threatened. When your success starts appearing in real life, it becomes impossible to ignore. Your progress silently asks questions. Why didn't they start? Why did they quit? Why did they settle? Why are they still waiting? Those questions don't need words. Your actions ask them every day. That's why some people celebrate potential but struggle to celebrate achievement. Potential feels safe because it belongs to tomorrow. Achievement feels dangerous because it exists today. The dream was a story. The reality is proof. And proof has a way of making people uncomfortable, especially when they spent years convincing themselves that certain things couldn't be done, shouldn't be attempted, or were simply impossible for someone like you. Jealousy is rarely honest. It doesn't walk into the room and announce itself. It doesn't introduce itself by saying, "I don't like your success." That would be too simple, too obvious. People are much better at hiding uncomfortable emotions than they are at confronting them. So jealousy learns to wear disguises. Sometimes it sounds like advice. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it sounds like someone trying to protect you from disappointment. And if you're not paying attention, you might mistake it for wisdom. When you begin growing, pursuing bigger goals, developing confidence, or creating opportunities for yourself, you'll notice an interesting pattern. Not everyone who questions you wants to help you. Not everyone who warns you is trying to protect you. Not everyone who criticizes you is trying to make you better. Some people simply don't like seeing you move beyond the limits they accepted for themselves. But they can't say that, so they become experts at disguising resistance as reason. They'll tell you to be realistic when you're being ambitious. They'll tell you to slow down when you're gaining momentum. They'll tell you not to aim too high when you're finally starting to believe in yourself. And the words sound harmless because they're wrapped in concern. The human mind is clever. It can turn envy into a speech about caution. It can transform insecurity into criticism. It can make resentment sound like responsibility. That's why jealousy often arrives smiling. It asks questions that create doubt. It highlights risks while ignoring opportunities. It focuses on what could go wrong while pretending not to notice what's already going right. Not because those concerns are always invalid, but because the goal isn't clarity. The goal is hesitation. If they can make you question yourself long enough, maybe you'll stop moving. Maybe you'll stay where you are. Maybe you'll return to the version of yourself that made them feel comfortable. And comfort is often what hidden jealousy protects. Because your growth changes the atmosphere, Your confidence challenges excuses, your discipline challenges laziness, your courage challenges fear. Without saying a word, you become evidence that more is possible. And evidence can be difficult to tolerate for someone who has spent years explaining why they never tried. That's why the most dangerous criticism isn't always loud hostility. It's the quiet voice that pretends to support you while slowly feeding your doubts. The voice that applauds your potential but questions every step toward achieving it. The voice that claims to be helping while secretly hoping you'll remain exactly where you started. The voice that doesn't attack your dreams directly because it knows something more effective than opposition. The power of making you doubt them yourself. Most people think growth is a personal journey. They imagine it as something that only affects their goals, their income, their confidence, or their achievements. They believe that if they work on themselves, everything around them will remain exactly the same. The same friendships, the same conversations, the same relationships, the same dynamics. But growth doesn't just change your results, it changes the way you see the world. And once your perspective changes, the people around you begin to notice. The conversations that once entertained you start feeling empty. The habits you once defended start looking destructive. The distractions that once controlled your attention lose their power. You become more aware of how people think, how they behave, and how they influence your life. Not because you're better than anyone, because you're different from who you used to be. That's where the tension begins. Many relationships are built on unspoken agreements. Invisible expectations that nobody talks about. You stay the same and I'll stay the same. You play your role and I'll play mine. Everything feels stable because everyone knows what to expect. Then growth arrives and breaks the script. The person who once tolerated disrespect starts creating boundaries. The person who always stayed quiet starts speaking honestly. The person who constantly sought approval starts trusting themselves. The person who feared change starts embracing it. And suddenly, relationships that felt permanent begin feeling unfamiliar. Not because growth destroyed them, because growth revealed what they were truly built on. Some connections become stronger. They evolve with you. They celebrate your progress and adapt to the changes happening in your life. Those people don't fear your growth because their support was never dependent on you remaining small. Others struggle, not because they hate you, because they were connected to a version of you that no longer exists. They were comfortable with your insecurities, comfortable with your self-doubt, comfortable with your willingness to accept less than you deserved. When those things disappear, the relationship changes whether anyone wants it to or not. The hardest part is realizing that growth can create distance without creating conflict. No arguments, no betrayal, no dramatic ending. Just a gradual separation between people moving in different directions. You begin seeking purpose while they seek comfort. You begin pursuing improvement while they defend familiarity. You begin building a future while they remain attached to the past, and every step forward quietly widens the gap, because growth doesn't simply upgrade your circumstances, it transforms your standards, your priorities, your mindset, and the role you play in the lives of the people around you. And once those things change, the relationships built around the old version of you can never feel exactly the same again. The strange thing about success is that resistance doesn't disappear when you start winning. It grows. Many people believe life becomes easier once you gain confidence, achieve results, and move closer to your goals. They imagine that hard work eventually earns peace, that success silences doubt, that progress removes obstacles. But reality has a darker sense of humor. The higher you rise, the more visible you become, and visibility attracts attention. When you're standing at the bottom, very few people care what you're doing. Your dreams are small enough to ignore. Your ambitions seem harmless. Your efforts don't threaten anyone's expectations. You blend into the background like everyone else. Then you start climbing. One achievement becomes two. One victory becomes several. One step forward becomes a pattern. And suddenly people begin watching, not because you've changed who they are, because your progress changes what they notice. Every level of growth introduces a new form of resistance. At first, it's doubt. People question whether you'll succeed. Then, when success becomes impossible to deny, doubt transforms into criticism. If criticism fails, it becomes comparison. If comparison fails, it becomes resentment. The obstacle changes shape, but it rarely disappears. That's because growth creates contrast. The higher you rise, the more obvious the difference becomes between action and excuses, discipline and procrastination, courage and fear. And contrast makes people uncomfortable. Some will misunderstand your confidence and call it arrogance. Some will misunderstand your focus and call it obsession. Some will misunderstand your boundaries and call them attitude. Not because those labels are true, because explanations are easier than acceptance. It's easier to criticize someone's climb than to admit you never started your own. The irony is that resistance often becomes proof that you're moving in the right direction. Nobody argues with someone who isn't progressing. Nobody feels challenged by someone standing still. Nobody spends energy trying to pull down a person who isn't rising. People react when movement becomes visible, when your growth begins creating results, when your discipline begins separating you from the crowd, when your life becomes evidence that persistence can overcome excuses. That's why every new level brings new pressure. More expectations, more opinions, more eyes watching, more voices speaking, more people projecting their fears, limitations, and insecurities onto your journey. And the climb continues anyway, because the goal was never to reach a place where resistance disappears. The goal was to become strong enough that resistance no longer decides your direction, no matter how loud the crowd becomes, how uncomfortable your progress makes others feel, or how many people stand below hoping you'll stop climbing long before you reach the height they never believed was possible for you.